I didn't think knocking on a stranger's door during a blizzard could almost get me killed. At the time, I thought I was choosing warmth over freezing to death. What I didn't know was that the man inside that house wasn't alone, even though I never saw anyone else. There were footsteps on the ceiling of a one-story home. There was a locked room he refused to explain. And when he finally attacked me, he kept whispering the same terrifying words. "She's been waiting." If I had arrived 10 minutes later, I might never have left that house at all. When you're trapped in a blizzard, survival instincts take over. You stop thinking clearly. You stop weighing consequences. You stop trusting your gut. You just look for warmth, for light, for anything that feels like safety. That's how I ended up knocking on the wrong door. I didn't know the man inside had been waiting for someone to arrive. I didn't know the house had a room that was always locked from the outside. And I definitely didn't know that the storm wasn't the most dangerous thing in those woods that night. If I had waited 10 more minutes in my truck, if I had chosen the next house instead of that one, I probably wouldn't be telling this story. About 6 years ago, I moved to northern Montana for work. I'd been offered a position maintaining communications towers in remote areas, which meant long drives, solitude, and a lot of snow. Most people hated that idea. I loved it. I've never been particularly social. Crowded cities make my skin crawl. Too much noise, too many people, too many expectations. I liked the idea of coming home to silence, to dark skies full of stars, to knowing that when I locked my door at night, there was nothing outside but wind and trees. The rental I found sat at the edge of a small rural valley about 20 minutes outside a town called Briar Glen. My nearest neighbor was far enough away that I could barely see their porch light on clear nights. Cell service was weak. The roads weren't plowed regularly, but the rent was cheap, the house was sturdy, and the isolation was exactly what I wanted. The first 2 winters were uneventful. Hard storms, sure, but nothing I couldn't handle. I drove a heavy-duty SUV with snow tires, emergency kits, food, blankets, flares, everything. I prided myself on being prepared. That confidence almost got me killed. The day it happened started like any other. The forecast mentioned light snow. Nothing dramatic. I drove into town that morning to inspect a damaged relay station. By early afternoon, the wind picked up. Snow started falling thicker, faster. Within an hour, visibility dropped to near zero. Local radio stations started advising people to get home immediately. I packed up and left. The drive back was tense, but manageable until I reached the back roads near my property. Drifts were forming fast. Wind gusts pushed the vehicle sideways. My windshield wipers struggled to keep up. When I finally turned onto my long gravel driveway, relief washed over me. That relief lasted about 10 seconds. My front gate was buried under nearly 2 feet of snow. I tried pushing it open. It wouldn't budge. The latch was frozen solid. My gloves soaked through. My fingers went numb almost instantly. I tried warming it with my breath, kicking it, even ramming it lightly with the bumper. Nothing worked. By the time I gave up, the snow had already started piling up around my tires. That's when panic started whispering in the back of my mind. If I stayed in the vehicle and the engine stalled, I'd be in serious trouble. Carbon monoxide, freezing temperatures, no cell signal. Driving back out wasn't an option anymore. The drifts had already blocked the driveway behind me. I was stuck. The nearest house I knew of was about a third of a mile down the road. So I grabbed my emergency flashlight, wrapped my scarf tight around my face, locked the SUV, and started walking into the storm. Walking through a blizzard disorients you faster than you'd think. The wind howls in every direction. Snow stings your face like needles. Landmarks disappear. Everything becomes white in movement. I kept my eyes locked forward, searching for any sign of light. After what felt like forever, I finally saw a faint yellow glow through the swirling snow. A house. Single story. Old. Weathered siding. One porch light barely fighting against the storm. I stumbled up the steps and knocked hard. No answer. I knocked again. Just as I was turning away, the door opened suddenly. The man who stood there was tall and thin, probably late 50s or early 60s. His hair was graying, his face pale and tired. His eyes looked distant, like he hadn't slept properly in a long time. He stared at me for several seconds without speaking. I introduced myself quickly and explained the situation. The storm, my blocked driveway, needing shelter. He hesitated, then stepped aside and said, "You can come in." His voice was flat, emotionless, but the warmth inside was overwhelming, and at that moment, I didn't care about anything else. The inside of the house smelled faintly of dust and old wood. The furniture was outdated. Heavy curtains covered every window. A single lamp illuminated the living room in dim yellow light. He introduced himself as Harold. We exchanged awkward small talk. Where I worked, how long I'd lived nearby, how bad the storm was getting. But something wasn't right. Harold couldn't maintain eye contact. His gaze constantly drifted toward the hallway behind him. Sometimes he'd stop mid-sentence and just listen, like he was waiting for a sound only he could hear. I tried to ignore the growing unease. Eventually, exhaustion hit me hard. I asked if I could rest on the couch until the storm eased. He nodded immediately, almost too eagerly. He turned off the lamp and left me alone in the dark living room. Or so I thought. I lay there staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. The house was silent except for the wind, rattling outside. Then I heard it. A slow, heavy thump, directly above me. I frowned. This was a single-story house. No upstairs. Another thump followed, then a dragging sound. Something was moving on the ceiling. I sat up slowly, heart pounding. That's when I saw Harold standing in the doorway, watching me in the darkness. I hadn't heard him approach. Before I could speak, he rushed me. He slammed into me, knocking the air from my lungs. We crashed onto the floor. His grip was surprisingly strong. His hands wrapped around my throat. His face twisted with panic and desperation. "She's lonely," he kept muttering. "She needs someone. She won't wait much longer." I struggled violently, managing to knee him hard enough to loosen his grip. I shoved him off and scrambled to my feet. I grabbed my jacket and ran for the door. "Behind me," he screamed. "You can't leave her alone." I burst into the storm and ran blindly toward the next visible light down the road. The next house belonged to a middle-aged couple named Derek and Lynn. They pulled me inside immediately, wrapped me in blankets, and called the authorities. Once I calmed down, I told them everything. Their faces darkened. Derek quietly said, "You went into Harold's place." They explained that years earlier, Harold's sister had vanished. She lived with him. No body was ever found. No charges were filed, but everyone in the valley avoided his house. Some claimed they saw lights moving inside when no one was home. Others reported hearing footsteps on his roof at night. No one went near him anymore. Police took a report. Nothing came of it. Harold still lives out there. I still drive past that road sometimes. And every time I do, I notice the same thing. That porch light is always on, even in daylight, waiting. Sometimes survival isn't about strength or intelligence. Sometimes it's about choosing the right door when everything else is trying to kill you. And sometimes, the wrong door is already waiting for you to knock. They told me no one else had been on that mountain. No hikers, no skiers, no search teams, no footprints besides mine. But someone had been holding me upright for nearly an hour while my leg barely worked. Someone spoke to me. Someone laughed with me. Someone kept me moving when I was seconds from collapsing in the snow. And when I finally stopped long enough to catch my breath, he was gone. This happened 6 years ago, and I still don't have an explanation. My name is Lucas Hale. I'm 35 now, living in western Montana, married, steady job, quiet life. On the surface, nothing about me screams paranormal story, but my 20s were different. For most of my adult life, I was a competitive alpine skier. Slalom, downhill, regional circuits. I wasn't Olympic material or anything like that, but I made a living chasing snow and speed. Mountains were home to me in the way cities are home to other people. By 27, my knees and hips had started sending warnings I couldn't ignore anymore. Nothing dramatic, just enough pain and where that I knew I wouldn't be racing forever. When I stepped away from competition, I didn't step away from skiing. If anything, I finally had the freedom to ski the way I actually loved. Deep backcountry, remote terrain, places where chairlifts couldn't reach and cell service didn't exist. I was avalanche certified, wilderness first aid trained. I carried emergency gear religiously. I respected the mountains, which is why what happened still bothers me so deeply. This happened in late March, early spring runoff season. I had my eye on a remote range near the Idaho border called Silver Knife Ridge. I'd skied there a handful of times before. The forecast showed light snow, mild winds, nothing dramatic. Avalanche risk was moderate, but manageable if I stayed conservative. I checked everything twice. Weather, wind direction, recent snowfall layers. It looked safe. I left before sunrise and parked at a trailhead. That barely deserved the name. Just a dirt pullout and a half-buried sign. No other vehicles. That wasn't unusual. I skinned uphill for almost 3 hours, breaking trail through fresh powder. The snowfall picked up steadily, thicker and heavier than predicted. Wind shifted directions and started pushing snow sideways instead of straight down. That should have been my sign to turn back. But I was already near the top of the line I wanted to run. Just one descent, I told myself. The first part of the run was beautiful. Quiet, deep powder, controlled turns. About 2/3 of the way down, the snowpack shifted. If you've never experienced an avalanche, it's not dramatic like the movies at first. There's no warning roar, just a sudden realization that the ground underneath you is no longer solid. The snow moved, and so did I. I was knocked off my skis instantly, tumbled end over end, breath punched from my lungs, body slammed into something buried under the drift. Rock, maybe, then silence. My skis had released, thank God, but one of them was gone. When I tried to stand, my left leg folded beneath me. Pain exploded up my thigh and hip so violently that my vision blurred. I knew immediately I was in serious trouble. The storm was getting worse. Visibility was dropping fast. Wind screamed through the trees. I couldn't ski out with one ski and a damaged leg. I had 3 choices, and all of them were bad. 1. Stay put and hope someone came looking. 2. Dig in and attempt to survive the storm overnight. 3. Move, slowly, painfully, downhill toward the trailhead. No one knew exactly where I was. I hadn't filed a formal route plan. Waiting felt like gambling my life. I chose to move. I snapped one pole shorter and used it like a crutch. Every step felt like someone driving a nail into my leg. Snow thickened into white fog. The mountain disappeared into nothingness. That's when I heard something behind me. At first, I assumed it was adrenaline messing with my senses. Wind can sound like voices. Snow can look like movement. But when I turned around, I saw a figure moving downhill toward me. Another skier. For a moment, my brain refused to accept it. It felt impossible. No one else should have been out there. He approached steadily, skis cutting clean lines through the powder. He wore dark gear, face mostly hidden behind goggles, and a balaclava. Relief hit me so hard I almost collapsed. He stopped a few feet away and pulled his goggles up. "Are you hurt?" he asked. His voice sounded calm. Normal. Solid. I told him about the avalanche and my leg. Without hesitation, he moved to my side and let me put my arm over his shoulder. We started moving together. The strangest part wasn't fear. It was familiarity. I felt like I knew him. Not personally, but like encountering something inevitable. Like meeting someone you were always going to meet. We talked while we moved. Small talk. Weather. Conditions. How stupid the storm had gotten. At one point, he said something that stuck with me. "I haven't used my legs in a long time," he said, almost laughing. "Feels good to be back on solid ground." I assumed it was some metaphor or inside joke. I laughed it off, but the way he said it, there was something strange about it. After nearly an hour of slow progress, my leg was shaking uncontrollably. I told him I needed to stop for just a few seconds. I leaned against a tree and closed my eyes. For seconds, maybe less. When I opened them, he was gone. No sound, no movement, no tracks leading away, just blowing snow and empty forest. I called out his name, even though I realized I'd never asked what it was. No response. I searched the area desperately, panic rising in my chest. There were no ski tracks beside mine, only my own. The realization hit me like vertigo. He hadn't left tracks while helping me either. Not behind me, not beside me, nothing. My stomach dropped. I felt suddenly alone in a way that bordered on primal terror. Had I hallucinated him? Was shock messing with my brain? Was I already dying? But my arm still remembered the pressure of his shoulder. My muscles remembered being supported. I forced myself to keep moving. The last mile blurred into pain and instinct. I don't remember much except refusing to stop. Eventually, I reached the tree line, then the trailhead. My car sat buried under snow. I collapsed into the driver's seat and cranked the heater until my hands stopped shaking. I drove straight to the hospital. The diagnosis: severe ligament sprain, deep bruising, no fracture. The doctor told me I was incredibly lucky. Lucky didn't feel like the right word. 3 days later, while recovering at home, I was browsing a regional ski forum. That's when I saw the headline: "Backcountry skier presumed dead after storm on Silver Knife Ridge." The incident had happened about 3 weeks earlier. A solo skier had gone missing during a late-season storm. Search crews had failed to locate a body. No photos, no social media, just a name: Ethan Rowe, age 31. I stared at that article for a long time. The storm dates matched. The location matched. The conditions matched. And that sentence echoed in my head. I haven't used my legs in a long time. I want to believe it was a hallucination. Shock, hypothermia, stress. But hallucinations don't support your weight for an hour. They don't leave physical memory in your muscles. They don't speak with intention. I still ski, but I never go alone anymore. And sometimes, when the wind moves through the trees just right, I swear I hear skis cutting through powder beside me. The police told me something that still makes my stomach turn every time I think about it. They said there were no footprints leading from the road to my house. Not from the abandoned car they found buried in snow. Not from the trees. Not from anywhere. But someone had been standing on my porch. Someone had walked around my house. Someone had tried to get inside. And when I looked down at his boots earlier that night, they were perfectly clean. This happened during one of the worst blizzards upstate Vermont has seen in years. And I still don't know what was knocking on my door. My name's Evan. I'm 29 years old, and I live alone in a small rental outside a town called Millbrook Ridge. It's the kind of place people move away from, not toward. Long winters, spotty cell service, quiet roads that disappear under snow half the year. I work remotely as a data analyst for a logistics company. It sounds impressive until you realize it mostly means staring at spreadsheets and sweatpants for 8 hours a day. Some weeks I don't even step outside. I chose this place on purpose. I like the quiet. I like knowing my nearest neighbor is far enough away that I can't hear their dog bark or their TV through the walls. Out here, nights are silent in a way cities never are. But silence can feel different during a storm. The weather warnings started 3 days before it hit. Every local channel was calling it a potentially historic system. I didn't think much of it at first. Forecasts exaggerate all the time. Still, I stocked up. Groceries, batteries, flashlights, water, just in case. By late afternoon, the snow started falling hard. Thick sheets of white swallowed the road outside my window. Wind slammed into the siding like invisible waves. By 9 that night, I couldn't see the end of my driveway. I sat on the couch with the TV on low, half listening to the weather updates, half scrolling on my phone. The wind never stopped. It didn't gust, it roared constantly, like standing next to a highway made of air. That's when I heard something different. A dull thud, then a dragging sound, like something heavy scraping across wood. I assumed a tree limb had fallen onto the porch or roof. There are old pines everywhere around my place. It didn't seem alarming at first, until about 20 minutes later, when I heard a car horn. Not a normal honk. Weak, broken, like someone was barely pressing it. I stood at the front window and squinted through the snow. Down near the road, I could see headlights cutting through the white blur. A vehicle sat angled slightly off the shoulder. No movement, no doors opening, just the lights and the storm swallowing everything else. I waited a few minutes, expecting to see someone climb out. Nothing happened. My first instinct was that someone had slid into the ditch. It happens constantly out here in winter. I debated going outside, but the visibility was awful. The wind was vicious. I couldn't see more than 10 feet in front of me. I told myself that if they needed help, they'd come to the door. I went back to the couch. About half an hour later, the knocking started. 3 slow knocks. Heavy, deliberate. I froze. I didn't open the door. Instead, I called out through it, asking who was there. A man's voice answered. He said his car had gotten stuck and he needed to warm up and use a phone. His voice sounded strained and breathless, like he'd been fighting the wind. I hesitated. I cracked the door just enough to keep the chain engaged. He stood there covered in snow. His jacket, shoulders, hair, all dusted white. His face was red from the cold. He looked exhausted. He introduced himself as Caleb. He said his phone battery had died and he'd been walking for a while trying to find a house with lights on. I almost unlocked the chain, and then I looked down. His boots were clean, not damp, not snowy, not muddy, clean and dry, like he'd stepped out of a warm car. My stomach tightened instantly. I don't know why that detail hit me so hard, but it did. Everything else about him screamed blizzard, except his feet. I told him I would call for help instead. His tone changed slightly. He asked again to be let inside, firmer this time. I said no. I closed the door and locked it. I could hear him mutter something on the porch, but I didn't stay to listen. I called 911 immediately and explained the situation. The operator told me officers were on the way, but response might be delayed due to the weather. While I was still on the phone, I heard footsteps moving away from my porch, toward the side of the house. I moved quietly to a side window and peeked through the curtain. I could barely make him out through the snow, but he was standing near the corner of my house, not moving, just looking up at the windows, like he was deciding something. A few minutes later, the banging started on my back door. Hard, violent, the entire frame rattled. I grabbed a kitchen knife and retreated into my bedroom, locking the door behind me. My heart was pounding so loud I could barely hear anything else. The banging stopped after about a minute. Silence returned. Too much silence. I stood there frozen for what felt like forever. Then I heard the horn again. This time it was one long, continuous blast, like someone leaning on it intentionally. Police arrived about 15 minutes later. They searched the property and found the vehicle partially buried further down the road than where I'd seen the lights earlier. The engine was cold, no signs of recent use. And then one of the officers told me something that made my blood run cold. There were no footprints between the vehicle and my house. None. The snow was completely undisturbed. The only tracks were around my driveway and near the back door, like someone had arrived another way entirely. The storm cleared by morning. Sunlight revealed the world buried under white. I stepped outside to check for damage. That's when I saw them. Muddy handprints on the outside of my bedroom window. Fresh. They hadn't been there during the police search, which meant someone had come back, or never left. 2 days later, I heard from a neighbor that another house about half a mile away had been broken into during the storm. Nothing was stolen, nothing damaged, just signs of someone being inside. That part unsettles me more than anything, because whatever was out there wasn't looking for things. It was looking for people. I still live in that house. I still hear the wind howl during storms. And every time someone knocks unexpectedly, I don't answer. Some doors only need to be opened once to change everything. And some footsteps never leave tracks.